Hailing back from the days of Medarot 3 and sticking around in almost every roster, quite honestly, ever since, it is the green caterpillar type GCT00 potato insect. With the kit of hold, double bug, wheeled legs, and the leg ability of Pupa, which grants a certain amount of damage reduction upon maintaining a certain Metaforce threshold. Now, Potato Insect is most certainly not anything that we haven't seen in previous titles, and this little caterpillar type has definitely seen its way around in a lot of different places and in a lot of different titles over the years, ever since its debut in Medarot 3. It's got a rather unique set of skills which are kind of fitting for a caterpillar, honestly, but make it still very tanky and moderately dangerous, but no matter which form that it's in. Hold on the head part is a negative ailment type melee skill that when attacking the target will debuff the heating and cooling by 25% of the enemy target, and it'll also apply a no dodge effect on the target. This means that once that ailment is in place, any hits that are incoming on that particular enemy are guaranteed to land no matter what. So this makes it a whole lot easier for attacks that have very low success rates or particularly dodgy enemies in particular, such as, say, like flight legs or sea legs. Makes it a lot easier to take them out without really having to dodge or survive a bunch of dodges or grazes trying to land a decent hit. Bug on both arms is another melee skill that has a negative ailment of bug attached to it. Simply put, attacking the enemy with this particular skill does allow for the possibility of guaranteeing a turn skip when successfully inflicting it on the target. This means that if you manage to just barely catch an enemy to the command line or prevent them from being able to start their heating phase, by the time they get to the command line, it's going to be a wasted action because they will not be able to actually complete it. Furthermore, Bug also inflicts a no defend penalty on cooldown during this phase, so this is going to be very nice for guaranteeing that not only are they going to be wasting their time when it comes to having to finish the heating phase, but also take a whole lot of punish damage for anything that does land on their cooldown if you're able to catch them quick enough. Wheeled legs means that a Potato Insect will have relatively decent coverage when it comes to stat spread, but unfortunately a very picky terrain compatibility. Now, with a base mobility of 856, that's honestly a very good starting place for where wheeled legs tend to want to sit. An evade of 1215 is really nice as well, so this means she can dodge or graze fairly solidly. A melee resist of 1083 and a shoot resist of 1107 are both very nice middle grounds too, so that's kind of in the nice little sweet spot that you want to sit in when it comes to your damage reduction, and trying to keep it at a nice little sweet spot and keep it as low as possible without having to overcompensate with lower speed or having to go paper armor with a glass cannon. When it comes to the armor department, though, she's surprisingly bulky for what she brings to the table. With a head armor of just over 3,700, arms at 3,539 each, and legs at just shy of 3,600, this green caterpillar type is surprisingly bulky, and it's going to take a good couple of hits to really cut this caterpillar down to size, because she brings a lot of high HP and some fairly solid heating and cooling stats as well between hold and double bug, so she can definitely zip back and forth across the field pretty easily to inflict turn skip or no dodge in a speed debuff in this case anytime she's on the field. The only real weaknesses to keep in mind, though, is the fact that because she is wheel-legged, she is going to have a lot of major terrain incompatibilities, and that's going to make using her just a little bit tricky unless you're on certain types of road, arena, or cyber terrain. That's kind of being generous. And furthermore, Pupa is a very nice ability to have, and it is thematically fitting to Potato Insect in this case, but it's also worth noting that it is kind of weird on this kit, because it doesn't synergize with anything, and it's mostly just a, if you have it, then great, if not, you're not really going to be missing out on a whole lot. Now, Potato Insect also is a rather interesting surprise, though, as it is the very first event reward Medarot ever handed out in Medarot S that is capable of meta change. And in this form, she exchanges her kit out entirely, going strictly to a support-based, passive aggression-based kit by shedding the armor and growing the wings as would a butterfly. In this form, she exchanges her kit out for field control, shoot trap, melee trap, flight legs, and the leg ability of Trap Plus, which buffs heating and cooling when using a setup type skill. Now, the easiest way I can describe Potato Insect's meta change form, and even alt mode to original mode to a degree, is basically Bad Hacker in reverse, where Bad Hacker starts as a trapper and then goes to a turn skipper. Potato Insect starts as a turn skipper and goes to a trapper, and she is extremely good at it, no less, with the kind of numbers that she's bringing to the table. Field Control on Drive A is a support-based skill that, once activated, actually has a couple of very solid effects. The first of which is that it will balance all terrain compatibilities of all allies to A rank and maximize their heavy limit to 3 while the buff is active. So this means that if you're already kind of chugging behind because your terrain matching is bad for whatever reason, honestly, you really don't have to worry about that anymore, because this guarantees you're going to be equalized on every terrain you're on no matter what. And even though the maximum heavy limit is nice, it's not necessarily something that you're going to be paying attention to, since you really don't want to overload your heavy limit anyway, but the balance on terrain is still a very solid perk all the same. Shoot Trap on Drive B is a setup skill that will place a trap on the field that will target anyone using a shooting-based attack on the enemy side. Simply put, this is passive aggression at its finest. Every time an enemy tries to use a shooting attack of any kind, the Shoot Trap will engage and punish them for a certain amount of damage to that particular part they were using. This can also break parts, so this means that if you can't necessarily break something on your own, this means it has a chance of breaking it by punishment or making it a whole lot easier for someone to come up behind the Shoot Trap and finish the job extremely easily. Melee Trap on Drive C is basically the exact same thing as Shoot Trap, but instead targeting melee attribute skills instead. So once again, this can break things on its own if it's triggered enough times, and since both have a starting charge of 5, it does mean it's going to be targeting quite a few things before it does officially expire and need reset. Flight Legs means that Potato Insect will trade a lot of her major terrain incompatibilities she had as a wheel-legged and exchange a whole lot of it for some very solid bulk with armor in the reduction and especially in her evade. Boosting her mobility from the lower 900s up to about roughly the same point at 949 means that she's going to be off to a very good start in the speed department furthermore. However, boosting her evade to 2175 means that she's going to be extremely dodgy while she's on the field in this state. So this means it's going to be a lot harder to land any particular hits because she's going to be dodging and grazing constantly. However, just bear in mind that as a flight leg, she does suddenly obtain a weakness to anti-air. So just something to keep in mind. However, she does boost her resistances just a little bit higher to a melee resist of 1491 and a shoot resist of 1220. So not too much of a difference compared to her original base form, but still just a little bit better in terms of keeping the damage on the down low. And a fairly healthy HP pool of just over 14,000 HP is extremely nice. Trap Plus also is a very nice perk in this case too, as it means that every time she uses a setup skill, which, would you look at that, Shoot Trap and Melee Trap are setup skills, she gets a passive heating and cooling boost whenever she's using them on her turn. And being completely honest, it's not like she really even needs them, because they both have very impressive heating and cooling in the mid 800s to high 900s. So this means she's going to be able to place those suckers down extremely easily with very little being able to outrun her. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Potato Insect a pretty well-rounded 7.5 out of 10, and some people could even argue me into an 8, because even though Hold and Bug isn't necessarily anything super impressive on its own, the wheeled legs with Pupa is really nice, but she has surprisingly interesting synergy with herself. If she's able to transform on first turn and use field control, she removes her own weakness of having bad terrain matching while in her base mode. So this means that she can slap that sucker down, get field control up, switch back into base mode, and have no issues whatsoever being able to inflict Hold or Bug as she pleases, and then be able to trigger Trap Plus when wanting to use Shoot or Melee Trap for some very incredible and extremely fast passive-aggressive damage. As mixed parts though, I do have to rate her just a little bit lower at a 6 out of 10. Even though you want to use Potato Insect primarily as a pure set in this case as a true passive aggression auxiliary type bot, you still can put her to very good use in her base mode, with the use of her wheeled leg with Pupa, which will synergize very well with any terrains that A, it's good on, and B, anyone that is a charge reliant support to trigger Pupa quicker, but you can also make use of Hold and Bug just as easily anywhere else as a very solid user-friendly type part that basically you can fit just about anywhere in any team build you're trying to assemble.